dynamics. I've been a dancer forever, a dance instructor. I love working with dancers now that I'm a PT, so I'm really excited to be sharing information regarding that, and specifically injury prevention today. So the plan is that we'll run through the presentation and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So your Zoom toolbar has a Q&A button. If you want to type anything in there as you think of it as we're going through, or at the end, if you think of something else, you can submit them right there. I'll pull that up at the end and we can run through those. So today, we're going to talk through some basics of what is injury, what influences injury. I know a lot of you are dancing at home since studios are closed right now, so we'll talk about how training might be different because of that. And then we'll discuss at the end what to do if you suspect you have an injury. So let's start with what is an injury. A simple definition is just any harm or hurt that leads to impairment of structure or function. To dive a little deeper, injuries can be in a couple of categories. We've got acute or overuse. So an acute injury is something that is sudden and typically includes some sort of trauma or incident or event. Things like landing a jump and twisting your ankle, falling and you catch yourself with your arm and you might accidentally fracture your wrist, things like things like that. And then the other category is overuse. These are the majority of injuries for dancers. They come on gradually and they're going to build up with repetitive motion or use of a specific body part. You might think of things like hip flexor tendinopathy, maybe shin splints, even stress fractures fall into this category. Most prevalent for dancers are the overuse injury. So we'll be discussing things as injury prevention, mostly aimed at that category. So training factors, as you might imagine, there's a lot of factors that might influence your body, your dancing, and your injury risk. So some of those are things that you might not really be able to change. Your bony anatomy, there's hormonal factors, but there's also some things that we can work with. So I like this image as sort of a good overview of everything that might be playing a role in you and your dancing. So just things like training errors, your training schedule, aesthetic demands, choreography, the shoes that you're wearing, the environment, how old you are, your gender, your strength, flexibility, nutrition, all of these can be visualized here as influencing the dancer. So like I said, today we're really going to focus on the things that we can change because that seems like a good rule of thumb in general. So we're going to start with hydration. It's super basic, but it's really, really important. And a lot of people are really missing this. So hydration can affect muscle function and energy levels. At rest, you should be drinking half your body weight in ounces of water per day. When you dance, and when it's hot outside, like it's getting to be summer now here in the DC area, and with sweating more, that number will need to go up. When you're well hydrated, it helps with things like muscle cramping. It can help flush out any extra like muscle byproducts that build up and lead to soreness. So really important to stay hydrated. We'll also talk about how and when to stretch. So a lot of dancers use static stretching as part of their warm-ups, but it's actually not as helpful as you might think it would be. There's research to show that static stretching can actually inhibit the power in a muscle. So that means it might make it harder to actually get that muscle to fire when you need it to. So instead, I'd recommend trying a dynamic warm-up. which is just moving through that range of motion of every muscle without holding at the end range. It would also be important to emphasize exercises that are aimed to sort of wake up, facilitate key muscle groups. So making sure that your abs are on, your glutes are on, your deep rotators for turnout, running through some balance and control exercises rather than just purely stretching before dancing. This sort of secret info, but BDI wants to expand this webinar dance series. So in the future, you might look out for a presentation sort of running through ideas of what those exercises might look like. But I would recommend sort of keeping that static stretch, the longer holds, 1 to 2 minutes for after your dance classes or after your performances. So aerobic fitness, it's well known that increased cardiovascular fitness decreases the likelihood of injury. Unfortunately, though, dance classes rarely are emphasizing that. So you sort of need that performance endurance, but classes aren't necessarily targeting that. So they stop and go. Maybe your exercise at the bar is 32 counts, and then you stop, and then you go again. But a performance piece is, 3 to 5 minutes, or a lot of the times even longer than that. So cross training is really key here to get your cardiovascular fitness up. So things like swimming, cycling, running, high intensity interval training, those sorts of things are all really good ways to build cardiovascular fitness. Fatigue is related to that. So dancers who are fatigued are more likely to get injured, and fatigue will come on faster for dancers with less cardiovascular fitness. So fatigue can come from a couple of sources. It can come from not having enough cardio endurance or muscle endurance to meet the demands of your dancing. Fatigue can also come from not having adequate rest periods. This is a bigger problem for dance in particular, since it's a year-round sort of practice, I guess, as opposed to sports that sort of have on and off seasons. So this sort of feeds into something called periodization. I knew I was going to mess this up. We'll just pretend like that went well. So this is a training method to optimize performance and reduce injury risk. So by rotating through periods of rest, relative rest, which might be sort of like a break from dance training, but staying active in other ways, or sort of nursing a specific injury. So if you've got a shoulder injury, you're relatively resting that while maintaining the rest of your training. So you're rotating through those cycles of rest, relative rest, and sort of varying intensities of your activity to help minimize fatigue. Like I mentioned, unfortunately, dancers don't always have an opportunity to completely run this cycle as other athletes do. So that's what sort of like pre-season training is for sports, if you've ever heard that term. Since dance is year-round, you don't really have that off time. So it's not a perfect application of this method from sports to dance, but what we can still learn from this is that rest and sort of a ramp-up period are important to minimize fatigue, overuse syndromes, and thus your injury of your risk of injury. So you might actually be coming to a point right now as you're transitioning from spring to summer where your schedule might change, and maybe hopefully you'll have a little bit of time that you can sort of apply these principles. So if you have a break, I'd encourage you to rest. That doesn't mean just like sit on your couch all day, do nothing. Stay moving recreationally, do your regular activity, but the rest is just no dance training. And then before you resume that training, start up with a cardio routine, do some Pilates work, any sort of like gym routine that you have for strengthening, that all would be important to start. And then you start, after you're doing that for a week or so, you can integrate some dance training slowly. So start with 3 days a week, build up to 4, build up back to your full schedule. But that'll help sort of optimize performance, reduce risk. So, okay, let's talk about training at home. I know a lot of studios are closed right now, and a lot of studios are offering sort of virtual classes, which is super awesome. A great way to stay connected and to keep dancers dancing. But there should be some things to sort of keep in your mind as you kind of transition to that. So first things, I know that COVID-19 is just making things really weird. So a lot is changing all the time. It's hard to manage all of that. So I know a lot of people are trying to keep up with responsibilities. A lot of dancers, their friend group is their dance group. So you're not seeing them as much as you would like. And then the actual training, along with, school work. You might have had some shows canceled for sort of the end of the training year. Summer intensives might be changed. So it's okay to feel burnt out. It's okay to be overwhelmed or sad or stressed. I read something recently that said all feelings are for feeling, which I liked. Just accept what you are feeling. I bring this up because poor mental health and poor well-being is correlated with a higher risk for injury. And it's also correlated with prolonged healing times. So do what you can to take care of yourself. You might already know what works for you as sort of your stress management strategies, or you might still be exploring that. So I just sort of listed a few ideas here on the slide, but things like breath work, yoga, meditation are always helpful. So are other art forms, drawing, painting, coloring, listening or playing music. Maybe you like to cook, so you can cook a nourishing meal. That would be a nice way of managing this. Or if there's any volunteer opportunities you can do from home, that might be good too. So don't feel like you have to add more dance or extra classes or anything else to your plate. It's okay to just sort of ride it. And then the last thing is, if you need help, please ask. Ask someone you trust or reach out to a counselor. BDI has counseling services if that's something that you feel like you need. So we're here for that too. So here's some more sort of like meat of the training at home though. So some differences that you might find between your house and your studio. You might not be able to really change all of these factors, but you can adjust yourself to them if you need to. So we'll start with temperature. It's harder to get moving if you feel cold. So if you have a really strong AC in your building, your house, then you can layer on some warm-ups as you need. If you're too hot, you're gonna fatigue faster. So if you're like, training jumps outside or exercising outside, that's something to consider and to leave space for. Mirrors. I don't want to recommend over-reliance on a mirror, but sometimes they are good feedback tools, especially if you're looking at things like alignment. So a lot of us have like, little full-length mirrors that we use to get dressed in the morning or whatever. So if you have that available to you and you can move that into your dance space, I say go for it. Flooring and surface is a really big one. So things to consider: if your floor is slick, if it's, tile or hardwood or laminate or something, you might dampen the bottom of your sock or your slipper a little bit, just so you have a little more grip. If it's carpet, be careful trying to turn, because that carpet will add extra friction and put a lot of torque on your knees and ankles. Studio floors are sort of springy, you know, so they absorb impact. So training jumps is going to be a factor with your flooring. So you might, you know, layer a yoga mat or something down so that you can jump on that. Or you might do it out in your yard if you have that available, but make sure it's really flat and you sort of walk through your space, make sure there's no holes or branches or anything sort of laying around that will, you know, you don't want to up your risk by landing a jump and twisting your ankle on an acorn. So your unobstructed space, we'll talk about next. So, I mean, most houses don't have such wide empty rooms as a dance studio. So you sort of have to make do, but you might try rearranging your furniture a little bit, clearing out some of the extra stuff on your floor so you've got room for your legs to be moving around. Same for, you know, if you're using a countertop as your bar, make sure there's nothing there so you've got room for your arms to be moving. Your computer or whatever you're streaming your class on, that's another factor that's new to dance. So now you have to sort of deal with the lag if you've got, you know, a slower connection, or you have to adjust your camera angles. Because of that, you've lost sort of hands-on corrections too, so that's a factor. You might be able to work with your instructors on sort of reorganizing class structure so that you're sort of doing your combination and then you get feedback, so you're not trying to sort of focus on your dance and at the same time be paying attention to your screen. That could be hard to manage. Managing interruptions is sort of our last thing. So computers make a lot of noise. You've got the sound on because you're listening to your teacher or your music. So make sure that sort of all your apps are closed. So your email's not going to ding at you. Your messages won't ding at you. If you can, let other people in your household know that you need a little bit of time and space, that you're going to be working on your dance right now, so that they know, like, this hour and a half you're busy. And if you can close the door, that'll help with that. And it'll also help, like, if you've got pets wandering around so they don't come in and you accidentally botlaw them. That would not be fun. So, okay, determining injury. That's what we'll talk about next. So even after all of this attention, after implementing some of these home training modifications, you're paying attention to your warm-ups and your hydration levels, you've been cross-training. What if these preventative measures just haven't worked as well as we would hope? So let's talk about how to determine if that ache or pain is truly an injury and how to sort of manage that. So 3 possibilities when you feel that sort of ache or pain. It could be just muscle soreness. It would be, second would be what we would categorize as a complaint. And then 3 is injury. So muscle soreness is going to appear 24 to 48 hours after your activity and will remain for another couple of days. These should feel better once you warm up and continue moving. So if that's the case, you're safe to kind of continue proceeding with your class as normal. A complaint be sort of a step up in intensity from soreness. Maybe it takes longer to dissipate than you would expect from soreness. Could also be something that happens more suddenly, but you're not certain is, you know, it's not that intense. It's something that you're managing fine on your own, kind of comes and goes. It's not uncommon that dancers and athletes are managing aches and pains like this pretty regularly. Professional dance companies report as many as 67 to 95% of their dancers report musculoskeletal complaints. You might feel like you need to modify either the intensity of your activity, You might need to build some strength in other areas to sort of offload that painful spot. These modifications might be limiting the amount you're jumping. Maybe it's lowering your leg for your extensions, but generally you can continue dancing. If something persists more than a week, you might check in with a healthcare provider. PTs can offer more specific modifications for your dancing, specific to your complaint. And they can offer some exercises and sort of self-care tips to help manage that. Injury. So injuries require complete rest from dance. And they're typically more severe. So you might see some signs of inflammation. That would be things like redness, warmth, swelling, general diminished function of that area. So you should see a healthcare provider, and then you should start yourself on what we call the PRICE method that you've probably heard for that inflammation management. So P for PRICE, P is to protect that area, R is rest the area, ICE for I, compress with either a wrap or a sleeve. That's tough depending on the body part, but typically for lower extremity leg injuries, which are the most common for dancers, you can either get an ACE wrap or a sleeve for most of those. And then E, elevate. Make sure it's all the way above your heart to drain that swelling back into your bloodstream. So this is a nice way to kind of categorize the differences in these three areas. And you can sort of help use this as a decision tree for what you're going to do to help manage yourself. So soreness, keep going. Good means you're working hard. Complaint, keep dancing, but with modifications as needed. Come see a PT for guidance for those modifications, especially if it's lasting more than a week. And then injury, for that, you should stop dancing, see your PT. They'll give you the same sorts of exercises and self-care strategies to manage. And then through that course of therapy, sort of help build you back up. It's actually, they would give you something that looks a little bit like what that periodization is. So it's, I got muted. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to take that as a yes because I'm not getting any signs otherwise. Oh, wait, here's my chat box. Okay, thanks. Okay. I think you heard most of what I was saying about an injury, but the gist is stop, see a PT, we'll help manage you from there, just to get you, we'll get you back into the dancing at a reasonable pace to let that heal and then ramp you back up. Okay. So I think now we'll do sort of our Q&A. If anything comes up after we've done with this, after we've done the Q&A, you can email afury@bodydynamicsinc.com. Can also reach out to BDI's front desk. We have a whole team of dance medicine, from physical therapists to fitness instructors, Pilates instructors, nutrition, and counseling. So we're here to help. Let me open my Q&A box. Let's see what's happening here. Okay. Anne says, would you please give some examples of what we should be doing to warm up before class? So things like, sort of like creative movement, if you will, like any sort of global motion, anything like, say, instead of stretching your hamstrings by doing a split, you stand and you do some forward fold and back up and forward fold and back up. So you're getting you're targeting that same muscle length, but you're not taking it to that end and just holding it there. Things like, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, hold on a second. Regarding the sort of strength and facilitation exercises to just get things like ready to support you, that is what I'm hoping we'll do a whole nother presentation on. But things like your body weight exercises, so making sure that your core is on, maybe you're doing some bird dogs or dead bugs, or, you know, if you like Pilates, that's your 100 exercise, or scissors or things like that. Clamshells for your turnout, just practicing balancing single leg, all of that would be a good way to get things sort of ready to support you. I know, so bar is sort of that, right? That's the point of bar in a ballet class. But once you're at bar, you're already thinking about the aesthetics of that, and you're thinking about the performance aspects. So this sort of like pre-bar is your chance to even get ready for that. It's your chance to be sort of on before you lose the control in that situation that bar brings. Okay, another question. Could you name the key areas that would benefit from facilitation exercises before class? So for sure your core, abs, specifically working even sort of on your oblique lines. So if you think about sort of like those diagonals working through your core, not just like that six pack up and down. Things like, I really like a dead bug for that. So you can sort of envision those diagonal lines because you're moving opposite arms and legs. Glutes for sure. Bridge exercises are really helpful. And then your deep rotators, like in the clamshell exercise, so you've got that stability from your hips and your turnout. Those are sort of like the ones I would highlight, certainly. If you have some complaint or extra soreness that's typical for you in your lower leg, you can target sort of the bottom of your feet with some exercises there. Strengthening exercises for the foot and ankle are going to be really important to get those on and ready to support you when you stand. Another question, if you had an injury before, but it still hurts sometimes, is that a complaint or an injury? That's a good question. I don't know if I have a really clear-cut answer for that. I think it would probably depend on your level, like the level of activity that you're working with before that starts to hurt. It might depend on how long it's been and what sort of, how long it's been since the original injury and sort of the healing process that you went through. So if it was an injury that you sort of, if you saw a physical therapist or another healthcare provider and they walked you through those steps of healing and building you back to return to dance, I would say that's probably more complaint. If it's just an injury that you had and it never really got better, but it never really went away, it sort of just lingered, I would say maybe that's still considered an injury. Either way though, I mean, you could always reach out for help and advice on it, no matter what category that's in, because we can always sort of assess your way of movement. And I think I mentioned a little bit like training errors. So you might have a specific way that you've been training that's influencing and sort of putting that area of injury at more risk, or sort of like overusing that. So, you know, it's helpful to sort of like step back, take a bigger picture, look all the way up and down the chain, we call it, but like your whole body and how it's working together, and assess from there. Maybe there's something that got lost in dealing with an injury the first time. Any other questions so far? I got a chat box. Let's see what that says. Yeah, so someone put in the chat box, are there any PTs more specialized in dance complaints injuries rather than, say, sports? At BDI, yes, we have a whole team specific to dance medicine. So we have maybe even like 5 PTs that have a lot of good background in dance. Either they were dancers themselves or have been studying with dance medicine practitioners for years and are really, really good at knowing what a dancer needs in particular, and like know the lingo, so you can use your terminology for, oh, I always struggle to land my fouettes or whatever, and they'll know what that means and how to address that in particular. Let's see. So what are good stretches for the foot arches? So, oh, that's hard. I want to like get down on the floor and show you, but I don't have space for that right now. That's for another time, but I'll walk you through. So it's nice if you've got a tennis ball, or like sometimes they have the balls with the little spikes on them, so you can roll out the arch of your foot and that will help. You can also do something called an FHL stretch, flexor hallucis longus. So that's a muscle that feeds your big toe in particular, and a lot of dancers that gets tight. So it would be something where you're flexing your foot and then you're also flexing your toes back. So that's sort of putting that on maximum stretch. I think a lot of dancers need strengthening in the arches too. So stretching is going to feel good, rolling out to feel good, but what's going to build endurance and prevent that sort of like soreness and tightness from coming up in the first place is some strength and endurance exercises. So I might notice, so you are trying to articulate each toe individually. So you can use your hands to hold down your other toes, but then you're like picking up your second toe repeatedly. And then you do the same with your other toes. So that's a nice way of building control over that area of the body and building some strength. You can also do sort of the reverse motion of that. A lot of dancers have TheraBands lying around. So if you have a lightweight one, you can put the band around just one toe, individual toes, and then you're gonna press into the band. So your band is here and you're pulling up and you're pressing like you're pointing, but you're just pressing the toe. If you have, well, I think you're probably good target the bottom of the foot. Anything else I can answer? You're welcome. Kira said thank you. Okay. Well, like I said, we're hoping to sort of make this a series. Close my Q&A. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of those exercises, hopefully. I sort of have a list here of things that we're brainstorming about. So if you have anything else that you have questions about or that you want to sort of discuss in this setting of a webinar, please let us know. You can email me go back if you need to see that email one more time. But I'd be super happy to get emails and answer anything I can via email, and then get me some ideas for what else we could talk about in this setting. As we move forward with planning more webinars, we'll let you know via email and social media when those are and what those will look like. So feel free to share those posts with your friends, with your studios, your dance communities at large. We'd be happy to share this info with lots of people. Let's see. Okay, last thing I wanted to mention is that next week, BDI is hosting another one of these Lunch and Learn seminars, same time, Friday afternoon, 12 o'clock. And the topic will be exercising during pregnancy. One of our fitness instructors, Ashley, will be leading that one. So thank you so much for attending. And then I put take a bow because I found this old picture of myself pretending to dance. So thank you all.
Thanks, Anna. That was great.